Summer growth looks different than growth the rest of the time of the year. You know, you may see a couple big weekends in the summer, but you're not going to see that like consistent growth in the summer the way that you may in the fall or the spring. People travel, there's just kind of different schedules. And so
you mean just overall number, right?
Yeah, I just mean
because you can
like,
track summer growth by looking at last year, but
Yeah,
you mean
yeah,
just
yeah.
like it is a down season for the whole year.
yeah, compared to the spring,
Right,
you know, or
right.
compared to around Easter or when people had their New Year's resolutions, they jump back into things, your attendance may be down compared
Right.
to that season.
Right.
And so it can make you think, okay, the data is just showing us like, man, everybody's just taking off for the summer. Let's not even worry about things.
Yeah, it's like because there's a slump, it's insignificant or something. And it's like, no, it may not be slumping when you compare it year over year,
Right.
especially when it comes to first-time guests and all that. Yeah.
I think the summer is a really strategic time for new people visiting your church.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
Hey guys, welcome to the Breaking Barriers podcast. My name is Pastor Bobby, and I'm here with Pastor Andrew. And today what we want to talk about is how to think about the summer season in the life of your church. So we've gone through, I don't know, this will be maybe our 14th summer season. And I think people make a really big mistake when it comes to summer, because if you've gone through enough summers, you know, you could begin to think, man, summer is somewhat of like a slow season. You know, if your church is relatively middle class, people are going to be traveling, kids are going to be out of school, you know, the data is not going to show that you're like, you know, bustling and growing like crazy over summer. And so that can have you end up thinking, man, summer's just a really slow season. And I would say that is actually a myth. The data for summer doesn't look the same as if it's, you know, around the Easter season or around the fall. But summer is really, really important. And so I think if you do some certain things during the summer and you think about summer the right way, it's one of these things where growth can look kind of slow over the summer, and then all of a sudden the fall comes and you're kind of surprised by the growth in the fall. So what I want to do is bring up 4 ways to kind of think about the summer to help you just not like check out over the summer.
That's right.
And I'm not saying we use summer to rest, and even our staff, you know, follows a lot of the same patterns as people in our church, you know, extra vacations and traveling, and kids are out of school and all that stuff. But you still can be strategic about the summer, even though it can feel a little bit slower.
Yeah, summers are strategic for, you know, the cyclical patterns that we see in big days. So I think that how we attack a summer, particularly in, you know, just being very intentional with first-time guests, Kids Week, student camp. I mean, the way you think about all that stuff together ultimately will sort of culminate in how you do on your next big day on the calendar, which is probably going to be, you know, if we follow what we talk about, is going to be, you know, some sort of back to school kickoff of fall.
Right. So the first thing to note, and this is just kind of a continuation of the introduction to the podcast here, is summer growth looks different than growth the rest of the time of the year. You know, you may see a couple big weekends in the summer, but you're not going to see that like consistent growth in the summer the way that you may in the fall or the spring. People travel, there's just kind of different schedules. And so
you mean just overall number, right?
Yeah, I just
because
mean
you can
like,
track summer growth by looking at last year, but
Yeah,
you mean
yeah,
just
yeah.
like it is a down season for the whole year.
yeah, compared to the spring,
Right,
you know, or
right.
compared to around Easter or when people had their New Year's resolutions, they jump back into things, your attendance may be down compared
Right.
to that season.
Right.
And so it can make you think, okay, the data is just showing us like, man, everybody's just taking off for the summer. Let's not even worry about things.
Yeah, it's like because there's a slump, it's insignificant or something. And it's like, no, it may not be slumping when you compare it year over year,
Right.
especially when it comes to first-time guests and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so number 2 really I think is what I really want to talk about here is I think the summer is a really strategic time for new people visiting your church. And as I was thinking about this podcast, I don't have any like special data to support this or anything, but you know, I think a lot of times summer visitors are very serious. These are people that a lot of times are maybe more serious than people visiting your church other times of the year. Because you got to think about it. You know, there's probably a lot of churches that are listening to this that are growing churches like we are and probably have a relatively similar demographic in terms of, you know, you're in your 40s, I'm in my 40s. We got a lot of people that are in that kind of 10-year age range, both sides, have middle school students or high school students or whatever. If our families were going to move to another city, it would most likely be during the summer.
Always. Yep.
You know, just because of the school schedule.
Right.
So you're going to have a different type of visitor that's coming in the summer. You know, somebody that like could probably jump in a lot quicker than somebody else that, you know, they've not been to church for years and years and they come to your Christmas service. And the summer visitor a lot of times can be very different than that person. And so I just think we got to think about summer in a really strategic way and think about like, because the problem is if you think, man, summer's slow season and you take your foot off the gas, some of that stuff that you do to like follow up with people and some of those systems you have, if you take your foot off the gas during the summer, when people in the summer are maybe the most likely to actually plug into your church, you're going to be making a really big mistake, you know, because you just think if there's a new family, they're a church family, they're moving here from Alabama or somewhere else, they're going to use the month of July and early August. They're probably actually thinking, hey, we need to plug into a church before school starts for our kids. So like, man, they show up not just kind of like, oh, I've never been to a church. It's like, man, they show up ready to be like, man, we're looking for like where we're going to plug in, where we're going to give, serve, all of that. So we got to keep that in mind.
Well, and people that are not believers, you know, I wonder if you're going to end up seeing very similar ideas. Like, I bet you moving, and I know a lot of this is anecdotal because how are you going to know, right? But I bet you moving in general will open people up to the idea of, man, I wonder if we want to give that another shot. You know, like we don't know anybody. It's a good way to get the kids to know some people, you know, that kind of idea. I really think what you're saying is right. I mean, I've met a ton of families that are that way over the years at Mercy Hill. A lot of times what you end up having is dad shows up at church one weekend, you meet him, and it's the same story. It's like, hey, coming down here looking for a house, you know, we're moving in late July. Get the kids enrolled and all that, and yeah, he's kind of got a different look on his face, you know, than other people at different times during the year.
They're in buy mode.
Yeah, they're kind of a hotter lead, if you want to say it like that, you know, because they are, their whole life is changing, and they're going to be looking very hard for community, for their kids to have some friends, for something stable that happens every week in their calendar. You know, a lot of that. Right. I think you're right. It creates a different type of a first-time guest.
Yeah, I think one maybe just catchy way, like how to think about it is like, man, this is like a fall regular attender in disguise.
Yeah.
And so like, man,
that's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
The people, and even if it's just like, you know, if you're the lead pastor or one of the kind of main pastors, even if it's just standing outside, you know, church after the service and just talking to people and hearing stories of people coming through, you probably have an opportunity to connect and hear some of those stories. Hey, we just moved in town, or hey, I just got a job here. My family hasn't moved yet, but I'm here house shopping or whatever. Like, you have an opportunity, like, hey, man, you need to like close right now on this person. You know, hey, you want to go out to lunch? Hey, you know, hey, we got this event, we got this thing.
Well, and I think you may even get into this, but a lot of churches won't have any assimilation stuff for the whole summer.
Right.
For whatever reason. I mean, it's like, hey, we're taking the summer off of connecting people.
Right.
Big
mistake.
Yeah, while we know we're going to have the most hungry people come. And I get it. I mean, you know, it's a downtime. People are on vacation. But we try hard to have at least 2 weekenders assimilation processes over the course of the summer so that people aren't in this, hey, in the fall we can get you connected, you know?
Yeah, so one of the things we want to think about is like, man, just because it can feel like a slower season, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have some special events to try to engage people over the summer. So, man, we want to have events to engage people. And like you said, man, so one of our biggest events over the summer is our Kids Week. And it's always been this way, but we've tried to make it a bigger deal because we realize how important it is. And we've seen the momentum from this. And that's one of those things where it's like, man, a couple weeks before Kids Week attendance could seem really slow. And even a couple weeks after Kids Week, attendance can seem really slow.
Yep.
But you and I both know a lot of stories of people that they maybe even attended a couple Kids Weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And now, many years later, they're like, man, they're dialed in, like they're serving, they're there holding the door, they are just fully engaged. And it, for whatever reason, it was the kids out of school summer, like it was the summer that actually got them plugged in. So we try to think strategically about 2 or 3 really big things like that.
Yeah. So I even just personally, like there's a family from my son's school that they, in anticipation of the Ridge launching, they started coming probably 3 or 4 months before that. And their daughter got baptized during our Christmas services this past year. And so it was just such a cool experience for them, and they've been coming, and they're really plugging in, and now they're really plugged in terms of just being here every week and stuff. But it was crazy because she had gotten saved 2 years before that at the Kids Week. When she was like 7 or 8 years old. They're 10 now. They've been coming to Kids Week every year. So she got saved 2 summers before at Kids Week, and then got baptized, 2 years later at the Christmas services. And now, I see him every week. And so kind of what you're saying in that situation, I know it's anecdotal, but in that situation, it just really bore out to be true. It's like, it was like a lifeline every summer to kind of get, re-engaged. And it seems like they kind of finally got bit by the thing. You got all the way in.
Yeah. It can feel counterintuitive, like, because it feels like you're investing when things are down. Mm-hmm. And what you're really doing is like, man, you're investing for what's going to happen in the fall. Because you think about like any time in the U.S., like when the stock market's down, right? It's like no one wants to invest, or people want to sell their investments. And it's like, man, that's kind of when you need to invest, because when that market starts going back up, you're going to be like super happy that you invested. And that is how the summer is. And so Kids Week is a really big one. You mentioned student camp. That's a really big one. Yeah. A lot of what you're doing in the summer, because it's not always going to be reflected in big numbers, you're kind of preparing the soil for that momentum that you're going to see in the fall. Mm-hmm. So with student camp, for example, even if, hey, we don't end up bringing as many students as, our high week in the spring or whatever, it's like, well, that's not the best way to think about it, because, man, if you can get some students to go to student camp, even if it's not the most amount of kids that you've ever had as students or whatever, man, if those kids go into the fall way more committed and way more plugged in, that's what's going to allow the student ministry to grow. Same thing with kids ministry. It's like, man, if we can use Kids Week where we have a parent that's kind of on the sidelines, they attend and they bring their kids, but like, what if through Kids Week, now this parent is super bought in and now they want to start serving long term. Mm-hmm. And we know that, man, that getting plugged in and that involvement is going to drive attendance in the fall. Yeah. And so it's about kind of creating that future momentum. Same thing with our college students. We do city project and different stuff where a small, compared to the amount of kids that come normally, a small group of kids, they commit to the summer to say, man, we want to go super deep over the summer. We want to grow. We want to learn. We send them on an international mission trip. And it's like, man, if you could take these 10 kids and they go into the fall, now totally different people. God has just changed them. God's grown them. What can that mean for the ministry in the fall?
Yeah, I think one of the unfortunate consequences of our current climate, where we have made discipleship one-on-one mentorship that happens weekly, like with the Bible and a book or whatever, which is awesome. I love that, but that's not what discipleship is. Discipleship is it can be 1,000 different things. Discipleship is what happens when people are growing. And that happens in a lot of different ways. We say word taught, life caught. If a guy recruits a high schooler to go on a mission trip with him, he is not doing one-on-one mentorship, but he has certainly opened up a massive discipleship environment. And the reason I say it's unfortunate is because when discipleship becomes one-on-one mentorship every week on a 7 o'clock over coffee on a Wednesday, and that's what it is, then I think you lose a really robust part of discipleship in my mind, which is there are seasons in a year, and there's seasons every few years where things are way different. They're wildly different. And so for then the week in and week out. Mm-hmm. And for us, that's summer. Our student ministry and high school ministry 15 or 18 of these high school kids will go through summer project as well.
Right.
You know, they take 2 months to sharpen the axe in a way that they don't have the bandwidth for any other time of year.
Right.
And so it is a massive investment. I mean, the future leaders of the community groups, the leaders of the weekend gathering type stuff, they're here with us, you know, all summer long. And, you know, for both high school, middle school, or not middle school, both high school and college. And it is a different rhythm for them. So it's, yeah, like you're saying, it looks slower. I mean, we love the fall kickoff, 500 college students, and now we're like, hey man, we're in, you know, we're investing in 20 day in, day out for the next 2 months, but it looks slower. But you know, it's the thing that it's the probably the speed later is really just contingent on the slowness now in the summer.
Yeah, maybe a good way to think of it is like, hey, you know, the noise can kind of feel a little reduced in the summer, which to invest in your leaders, that can be a really good thing.
Yep.
You know, so for like the student ministry, it's like, hey, we're not doing these, you know, 1,000 different events like we do in the fall or the spring. It's a little bit more simplified. We have camp and some other things like, man, this is a time to really invest in the people that we need to invest in.
Right.
You also have to be careful. This honestly could connect back more to number 2. You also have to be careful that you don't take off so much in the summer. I don't mean take time off. I just mean mentally take off. That you kind of present a different product when it comes to like the church over the summer, you know, where you have somebody new that comes and, man, is what you're presenting in the summer, is that the picture you want them to have of this is who we are, you know, like this is who we are. So we're not saying don't rest or don't go on vacation, but man, you got to kind of think about like, you don't just throw a bunch of people preaching and leading worship that have never done it before because you're like, it's summertime.
It's a struggle, man. Like, I mean, it's a struggle. We were with one of our church plants just recently, and they don't have a full band all summer. Mm-hmm. And I think they feel that because they're certainly not in what you're saying in terms of just like, well, it's summer, we're going to let our hair down. You know, they wish it wasn't that way, but a lot of their band is contingent on college students that come in. Well, they're not there. So they're trying to figure that out. But I do think what you're saying is important. We may be tempted to just say, well, we're going to kind of be really chill. And when it's like, dude, you should be trying to put your best foot forward during this time of year. Yeah,
for sure. Number 4, and we've been talking about this the whole time, that summer really sets up the fall. And, you know, that's the way that you need to think about it. You need to, you know, when we think about it, summer, it's distinct from the fall because, like I said, man, we're focusing on college and students, and we're focusing on Kids Week, and so there's a part of it that's like totally distinct. The schedule's different, the way people attend are different. Some of the people that are visiting are going to be different than how it normally is, but it certainly is like a part 1, part 2, part 3 sort of play that are all kind of connected in terms of summer to fall. So, you know, a lot of times the whole fall plan is really built around like, man, what is happening in the summer? So you think about, you know, all these different events that we're going to do in the summer. You know, the goal in many ways is like, man, baptisms and follow up that is going to help spur on what's going to happen in the fall. So for Kids Week, for example, you know, half of the discussion is around, pulling off Kids Week. The other half of the discussion is like, man, kids that come to Christ, like, man, what's a really good way that we're going to communicate so that these kids can get baptized? And how do we get their parents plugged in? And how do we convince them, hey, you should come back. This shouldn't just be a one-time thing. And same thing with the rest of these events, you know, like you may have a college student or you may have a high school student where, man, they started the summer. They were just kind of like, oh, this seems cool. You know, I'm going to sign up for this. This could be a good thing to do over the summer. Now at the end of the summer, man, they're going to be a leader, you know, like they want to lead, they want to invite, they want to serve. And so when you're thinking about, because we put a ton of energy into the fall launch, you know, back to school and student ministry launch, college ministry launch, but it's not disconnected from the stuff, you know, that's happening in the summer. And I would also say some of those newer people that you connect to over the summer that are like the really hot leads, you know, man, I'm here, I'm looking to buy a house. We just moved here. This company just came in town. And so my job moved. And yeah, we need to have weekenders over summer, but a lot of times when those people are really going to plug in and go deep, it's going to be in all that fall stuff that you have designed.
Right.
And it's why the summer looks so different, because some of these people may come, their family hasn't moved here yet or whatever, and you may not even see them for a month after that. But they came once or twice and they decided, hey, we're going to plug into Mercy Hill. Like, we're here when I get my family here, my kids. And so the fall needs to be set up so that, man, these people can go deep. You know, like, hey, what's your community group season look like? And how are you getting people into groups? How are you talking about giving?
Right.
How are you launching the student ministry and the college ministry? And are you giving people an opportunity to jump in to serve in the fall? And so that's, man, just kind of how these are all connected and how strategic these can be when they work together.
Yeah, I think it's an attempt to be good missionaries, you know? Like, the missionary kind of enterprise is not, it's not, you know, you're not thinking about changing the theology and changing the gospel and changing, you know, that's really not what it is. We kind of have that stuff all baked. It's really trying to read the culture and read people and what they're doing. And I think it's a little bit obtuse to not think about that humans act way different in different seasons throughout the year. And that doesn't mean the message changes in any way, but certainly it should mean that our methodology is different, you know, during the Easter season versus like smack middle of July versus certainly the fall launch versus Christmas, you know? And so that's kind of what we're, I think, trying to do is say, hey, there are cultural rhythms and the way that Western, you know, North Carolinian people are just wired of when they move, when they go to the beach, when they're ready to be in a group, when they're ready to settle in, when are, you know, all of this stuff. We're trying to read that and then sort of tailor the way the church is emphasizing different things at different moments so that it hits right at, you know, so it's kind of hitting right when the culture is, you know, a lot of guys in sports, they say, man, we're going to take what they give us, you know, and I think we're trying to do that. It's like, man, let's take what the culture gives us and, you know, let's try to tailor the way we're doing things around how human movements are already happening.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing, and then we'll close the podcast. I would say we really had to put a lot of emphasis in building our staff culture around this, because there can be a tendency, you know, you get to be a staff that has different segmented ministries, right? You have like community group ministry, and you got student ministry and kids ministry. And the seasons are not the same.
That's right.
For all those ministries.
Right.
And so when it's a smaller staff, everybody can kind of like think and feel the same way.
Yeah.
Hey, this is the, you know, season where we're really running hard. This is the season where we take off. Well, when you get a larger staff and those ministries are segmented, more like a football team versus like a basketball team, you know, some of those ministries are going to have to be running crazy hard in the summer.
Right.
You know, where it's like, yeah, we're not saying don't take a vacation or whatever, but it's not time to mentally check out.
Right.
You know, like if you're student ministry or college ministry, it's like, no, man, we're running super hard over the summer. It's going to look different. It's going to feel different. It's not the every week gathering.
Right.
And so you have to create that culture, because, you know, many years ago, we realized, like, man, we had people in certain ministries that were just like, man, I'm kind of sayonara.
It's summer.
It's like
summer. I'm checking out.
Well, man, you need to probably get over in this ministry if that's your life philosophy, that you're kind of sayonara in the summer.
I mean, think about our missions team. I mean, they're gonna have people on the ground in different countries
a lot
every week of this entire summer.
Right.
And then, you know, there's other people that, like, it's funny, like right when back to school is ramping up, they're going to be like, whew,
right.
The summer was, you know, they're going to be like kind of taking a breath a little bit. And when it comes to that part of their ministry. So yeah, that's a good point. It's like, man, it's really different for different ministries. And then also trying to teach the church that there are some things that are all in. So it doesn't matter if you're up or down. Like Kids Week is an all in moment. Christmas is an all-in moment. You know, we've talked about that, how people have to learn.
Yeah, and we say all in, it's like, hey, if you're a videographer or an admin at the church,
it doesn't matter. You're all serving, and
yep.
You know, we're there and hanging out and parent pit stop and the whole deal. And similar with Christmas, it's like, you know, we've had that in the past too, where we had people that were like, well, I go home on Christmas Eve at noon, and we're like, no, this is like one of the biggest days of the year for us. You know, this whole week of Christmas, like, man, we'll celebrate with our families and stuff, but we gotta tailor that around some of the stuff we're doing here, and we love it. And so just trying to teach the church when we need to be all in.
Yeah, and I think it's just, we had to learn. That's just teaching your staff, hey, it's maturity to understand that we don't have to all be on the exact same schedule, and different ministries can have a different busy season. And so I do think it's one thing you got to be careful of as the church gets larger, that you don't just say for all the staff, hey, this is a really busy season and this is going to be like a down season, because the bigger you get, every month for somebody is going to be is their busy season. So anyways, man, great conversation. Hey, I would encourage you guys, if you are not part of our private Facebook group, to check that out. We continue to build community in there and just, shoot good ideas back to one another. That's a great place to be if you have not joined that. So thank you guys.
Thanks.